The first frost of the season had settled over the valley, turning every blade of grass into a silver filament. From the kitchen window, warm light spilled out onto the backyard, falling short of the dark line where the forest began. Inside, the Hayes family lingered over dinner, the clink of forks, the murmur of conversation, the scent of wood smoke drifting in from the fireplace. 8-year-old Emily sat sideways in her chair, her gaze drifting toward the window as her father told a story about chopping wood earlier that day. The glass had fogged over in patches from the warmth inside, but through a clear spot, something caught her eye. A shape. At first, she thought it was a shadow cast by the old maple at the far end of the yard. But shadows didn't breathe. Shadows didn't have shoulders that rose and fell in slow, deliberate rhythm. "Dad," Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. When he came over, he squinted into the darkness. There it was, tall, solid, unmoving. The faint light from the porch just caught the curve of its back, the glint of something wet along its muzzle. A bear. Not rummaging. Not wandering. Just watching. For a long moment, no one spoke. The hum of the refrigerator felt suddenly loud. Outside, the bear didn't shift its weight or turn its head. It seemed fixed on the glowing windows, like it was measuring the distance between the forest and the people inside. "Don't move," Robert said quietly, his hand on Emily's shoulder. It wasn't fear that settled in the room, not yet. It was something heavier, something more curious. Because the bear wasn't acting like the ones they'd read about in the wildlife safety pamphlets. It wasn't startled by the smell of food. It wasn't even looking at the garbage bins. It was looking at them. And it didn't seem like it was planning to leave. Robert stepped away from the window, the wooden floor creaking beneath his boots. He'd lived in the valley his whole life and seen his share of black bears, usually from a distance, usually moving on their way. But this one felt different. He grabbed the old flashlight from the hook near the back door and flicked it on, the beam cutting a pale tunnel through the night. "Stay here," he told Emily and her mother, his voice steady but tighter than before. The back door groaned as he pushed it open, letting a wave of frigid air spill inside. His breath plumed in front of him as he stepped onto the porch. The flashlight's beam caught the frost glittering on the railings, then swept out to the far edge of the yard. The bear was still there. Its fur shimmered faintly in the cold light, each breath sending thin clouds into the air. When the beam landed on its face, its eyes reflected back in a way that made Robert's skin tighten, not with the green flare of a startled animal, but a calm, unblinking gold. He clapped his hands loudly. "Hey, get outta here." The sound cracked through the quiet, bouncing off the tree line. Any other bear would have turned, loped back into the forest. This one didn't move. Robert stomped his boot against the wooden steps, the sound echoing sharply. "Go on." A shift, not away, but closer. One slow step forward, snow crunching under its weight. The flashlight beam trembled just slightly in Robert's hand. From the doorway behind him, Emily's small voice, "Dad." The bear lowered its head, as if scenting something on the air. It wasn't aggression, not yet. But there was a focus in its posture, like it had a purpose here, and nothing Robert did was going to change its mind. The next morning brought pale sunlight and a thin crust of ice over the snow. Robert found the bear's tracks still pressed deep into the yard, wide, clean impressions leading in from the trees, circling near the porch, and stopping just short of the woodpile. He followed them with his eyes, uneasy. No claw marks on the porch rail, no paw prints leading away from the house. Just that strange circle, like the animal had been pacing, waiting. By midday, he'd convinced himself it was over. Bears didn't linger in the valley this time of year. Food was scarce, and instinct pulled them deeper into the forest to dens they'd carved months before. He kept busy, splitting logs, fixing the loose shutter, checking on the chickens. But as the light began to fade, the unease returned. The forest had a sound when dusk came, the slow quieting of birds, the distant crackle of ice shifting in the creek. That night, the quiet felt heavier. Emily was curled on the couch, coloring under a blanket. "Do you think it'll come back?" she asked, eyes on her paper. Robert hesitated. "No. Probably not." The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows. And then, the sound. Faint at first, almost swallowed by the wind. The steady crunch, crunch, crunch of something moving through the snow. Slow, deliberate. Robert moved to the window, parting the curtain just enough to see the yard. There it was again. The same hulking shape at the tree line. Watching. Only this time, it wasn't alone. A smaller shadow lingered just behind it, low to the ground, shuffling through the snow in short, unsteady steps. Robert's breath caught. The bear's visits weren't random. And whatever it had brought with it tonight wasn't here to be scared away. The wind cut across the yard, sweeping loose snow into thin, ghostly veils. Robert's eyes stayed locked on the smaller shadow behind the bear, his mind racing through possibilities. A cub? Injured prey? The bear stepped forward, its paws sinking deep into the drift. In its jaws, something dangled, not the limp weight of an animal, but the swaying, jerky movement of something struggling to hold on. Robert squinted against the dim light. The shape wasn't furred. It was wrapped. He felt his chest tighten. Cloth. It was cloth. The bear trudged closer, the snow crunching rhythmically beneath its weight. Emily had come up behind him now, peeking from the side of the curtain. "Dad, what is that?" He didn't answer. Couldn't. The creature stopped just a few feet beyond the porch, its breath billowing into the freezing air. Then, with surprising gentleness, it lowered its head and set the bundle in the snow. It sat there, unmoving for a moment, watching Robert through the window. Its eyes weren't wild or threatening, they held something else entirely. Expectation. Robert pushed the door open slowly, every instinct telling him this was dangerous. But the bear didn't flinch. It simply stood, the wind combing through its thick fur, waiting. The bundle in the snow shifted, releasing a muffled sound. A sound that made Robert's blood run cold. A whimper. He dropped to his knees in the snow, hands already pulling the frozen folds of fabric apart. And there, inside, was a child. No more than 4 years old. Face pale, lips trembling, but eyes fluttering open at the sudden warmth. When Robert looked up, the bear was already turning back toward the woods. It had done what it came to do. The moment Robert carried the child inside, chaos broke the stillness. Emily fetched blankets, hands shaking as she tried to wrap the little one in warmth. The boy's eyes were barely open, his breath shallow, his skin cold as river ice. Robert had just placed him near the fire when the sound came. A deep, guttural roar. It wasn't from the bear. Robert froze, then stepped to the window. Out in the white haze, a second shape emerged from the treeline, massive, heavier, and moving fast. Its dark fur bristled, steam rising from its jaws. The first bear, the one that had delivered the boy, had stopped halfway to the forest. It turned back toward the house, head low, muscles coiled. Robert's gut told him the truth. Whatever this newcomer was, it wasn't here to help. The air between the two bears seemed to crackle. The newcomer bellowed again, lumbering closer, leaving churned snow in its wake. The rescuer bear took a step forward, blocking its path to the porch. Inside, Emily whispered, "Dad, lock the door." He did, but his eyes stayed glued to the scene unfolding outside. The two titans now faced each other just yards from his home, their breath hanging in the frigid air like battle smoke. The aggressive bear lunged, snow exploding under its paws. The rescuer met it head-on, the impact sending a thunderclap through the stillness. They grappled, teeth flashing, claws raking through fur, rolling in the snow just feet from the porch steps. Robert stood ready, poker in hand, heart hammering. If either beast broke through the door, he would have seconds to act. Then, as suddenly as it began, the larger aggressor broke away, snarling before retreating toward the trees. The rescuer bear didn't follow. It simply stood there, chest heaving, snow clinging to its fur, and looked back at Robert through the glass. For a heartbeat, man and bear just stared at each other, both knowing exactly who the other had just saved. The storm had passed in the night, leaving the world washed in a pale gold glow. Sunlight streamed through the frost-edged window, catching in the wisps of steam rising from the fire. Robert woke first. His bones ached from sleeping upright in the chair, but his eyes went straight to the small form bundled in blankets. The boy was breathing deeper now, color returning to his cheeks. Emily slept on the rug beside him, hand resting protectively on the child's shoulder. Robert stood and looked outside. Fresh snow had fallen, softening the violence of last night's struggle. The churned-up drifts were still there, but the tracks told the story clearly. 2 bears, a fight, and a solitary set of paw prints leading away into the forest. The rescuer was gone. Robert pulled on his coat and stepped outside. The air was crisp and sharp in his lungs. He followed those tracks a few yards to the tree line, but stopped when the woods swallowed them whole. Somewhere in that shadowed expanse, the bear was moving on, leaving no more signs of its passing. He stood there for a long while, the silence of the morning wrapping around him. For the first time in years, his eyes stung, not from the cold, but from the thought that a wild creature had risked everything to bring a stranger's child to safety. Back inside, Emily was awake. The boy's voice, small and hoarse, whispered "Mama," before falling back into sleep. Robert met his daughter's gaze. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. Later, when the boy was safe with rescuers, and the porch was cleared of snow, Robert would find himself scanning the treeline each evening. Not expecting, just hoping. And sometimes, when the wind died down at dusk, he thought he heard the soft crunch of snow, like a quiet thank you, from somewhere deep in the forest.